What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on YouTube, and trying to go live right on my phone. I like to simulcast, I like to keep things fresh, and go from there. So let's see what we got here. The headline: I am probably going to blow a gasket during this edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I am legitimately pissed off for a lot of reasons that I can't wait to delve into. So let me just post it. Um, just unbelievable. I've been a UFC fan for a long time. I've watched the UFC do a lot of sketchy shit the last, let's just say, 10, 15 years plus. You know, off the top of my head, basically not allowing Randy Couture to attend events, banning Ariel Helwani, banning Stitch Duran, firing hype man Burt Watson, guys that made the company what it is today. Um, Favoritism from Dana White to Conor McGregor, favoritism from Dana White to John Jones, and just ridiculous, ridiculous stuff. And I think out of all of that, all the things that I'm alluding to, and there's so much more. The diehard UFC fans know exactly what I'm talking about. Uh, the fact is, what I read yesterday sets the sport of MMA back so far that this is a unredeemable blow to the sport that I think is worse than Conor McGregor's bus attack, worse than John Jones' bus attack, worse or bus attack, Bentley crash, fleeing the scene from a pregnant lady after hitting a pregnant lady, going back to his car, getting his weed bowl and his Viagra. Um, this is a new low. This is a new low. This is a new low for Dana White. This is an all-time low in the sport of MMA, and this is a sport that I want it to grow. I want it to do very well. I want to they get minimally. I mean, they are the lowest paid professional athlete on the professional athlete wage scale. What I read as I was scrolling down Twitter the other day, yesterday actually, was so shocking to me, and I have to get into it. So, for many, many years, the UFC has had on one of new levels that the UFC never anticipated. The Ultimate Fighter saved the UFC. Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar saved the UFC. It made people interested in the UFC. It made businessmen wonder if there was actually real money in this for them, and there was. You know, you fast forward 13 years later, that fight took place in 2005. Fast forward 13 years later, the company sold, actually not even 13 years later, 11 years later, the company sold for $4.25 billion, where the Fertitta brothers purchased the UFC for $2 million. So they made a hell of a profit. They made a pretty damn good business decision, a pretty damn good business decision. And they can do things that other companies can't do because they're like the NFL of MMA. I understand all of that. They've earned the right to do that. But along the way, they've tried to come up with more ways to make the organization bigger and better than ever before. They've tried to change things up, make things better, and just make the brand bigger, whether it's putting on fights globally, or changing the theme of the Ultimate Fighter, or signing fights, or making dream fights, or quote unquote money fights. They've tried to do a lot of things to stir up the attention in the sport. Dana White Along the Way show, which is the Dana White Contender Series, it's a show that the main title of the show has his own name in it. His own name is above that show show name. And the fact that on the next season of Dana White's Contender Series, former Carolina Panther and former Dallas Cowboy, former convict scumbag Greg Hardy is going to get a shot to fight on Dana White's Contender Series in the number one organization in MMA when this man was convicted of domestic violence. Photographs surfaced all over the world of his girlfriend, wife, whoever it was, bruised, beaten. I don't even know what word to use. This makes me so sick as an MMA fan. This makes me so sick as a sports fan in any sort. And I wanted to post this tonight. I wanted to post about this situation because I think it's disgusting. I think it's dirty, greedy, just bad money, bad for everybody. And the fact is, Dana White knew that this would be the reaction that people would say. Dana White knew that people would react this way. And that's why he did it. He wants people to react positively or negatively to the UFC, because either way, any publicity, as they say, is good publicity. Well, this is disgusting. I wouldn't even, if I was a commissioner or a UFC president or whatever you want to call it, if I owned my own sports league, Greg Hardy is the last guy that I would want to fight in my promotion. You can make all the jokes you want about CM Punk being 0-1 and fighting Mickey Gall and looking elementary in there. We can make all those jokes. At least Phil Brooks is a decent human being. At least Phil Brooks has a message that says, be straight edge, don't get caught up in drugs, don't get caught up in being bad. Greg Hardy done for anyone, to help anyone say to themselves, this is what you do. You know, he hasn't been a community servant. He's done nothing except try to profit from his own mental instability. He knew that he was never going to get a shot in the NFL again due to the fact that he punched his girlfriend, beat his girlfriend half to hell, and now he's going to get a shot to compete in the UFC on a UFC show. Disgusting. And Dana White should be ashamed of himself. This is the worst low that Dana White has ever done in his career as a UFC president, and that says a lot. I can run through the laundry list of things that Dana White has done as the UFC president that are highly, highly questionable. Banning Ariel Helwani for breaking a story about Brock Lesnar's comeback. Banning Randy Couture, the two-time two-weight class champion. Five-time champion, two-weight class champion. Light heavyweight champ. Put the UFC on the map, along with Chuck Liddell, along with Tito Ortiz, Griffin, Bonner, all that. Bans him from the UFC. Fires Stitch Duran out of the blue right after he was, signed the contract. No explanation for that. Signing CM Punk to fight in the UFC, who has no business being in the UFC. I think the average Joe has more business being in a UFC octagon than CM Punk does. Reports state that ex-NFL standout Greg Hardy will make pro debut with UFC Dana White's Contender Series. Controversial former NFL player is getting a shot at the UFC. How is this a good headline? How is any of this good for the sport of MMA? What would make Dana White say to himself, signing this guy will be great for us? I can't tell. I don't have an answer to that. The answer to that. And you got to think of it this way too. A week after the most high-profile star attacks a bus filled with fighters, whether it was because he was defending his buddy or whatever reason people want to say and throw out there, he was stupid. He acted like a child. He acted like an idiot, and got in serious, put the card in serious jeopardy of actually continuing. The event was almost canceled because of his antics and his actions. That leaves the casual people, the people that are not big MMA fans, like myself, like you, out. When the reality is most of these guys have fought, whether it be, or competed, I should say, have competed in other arenas inside combat, whether it be boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and they just want an extension of their career. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, guys that were all-time great Olympian wrestlers didn't have a extension to their career. The UFC became an extension to a wrestler's career, or to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner's career, or to a boxer's career. They wanted to go another path. Holly Holm could have continued to box. She could have continued to kickbox. She could have continued to punt people's ring. She wanted a challenge. She wanted a challenge. And the same thing, vice versa. You know, with other situations. Could have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is another example. Undefeated, one of the best kickboxers, pro kickboxers probably of all time. Could have continued, could have made a lot of money in that sport, but he wanted a challenge. He wanted to fight in the UFC. Those people deserve the opportunity to fight in the UFC, not dirtbag, scumbag, former washout players like Greg Hardy. A trio of amateur fights. 3 amateur fights. 3 more amateur fights than me. Hardy 0-0, according to reports from MMA Today and MMAfighting.com, will turn part of the UFC's Fighter Search Show, the Dana White Contender Series. According to the report, we'll meet Brandon Sales, on a June 12th edition of the show. I know what I won't be doing on June 12th. I won't be watching that garbage. Dana White's Contender Series debuted in the summer of 2017. Each of 8 weekly episodes streamed on UFC Fight Pass, featured 5 fights. At the end of the night, UFC President Dana White picked typically 2 fighters to come join the UFC with contracts. If there, and I know there is, but I'm saying this sarcastically, if there is a God, I would hope, and there is, I think there's a person, I should go to church more than I do, but I'm saying this like sarcastically, and I shouldn't say it like this, but I hope when Greg Hardy puts his gloves up and he's about to fight, I hope he gets kicked straight in the teeth and does a Neo Matrix bend and is knocked unconscious. That's what I would hope for. That would be good publicity. That would be fun for me. I would enjoy that. Hardy, who has been training with American Top Team, is one of the most high-profile gyms in mixed martial arts, for those of you that don't know. As a heavyweight, made his amateur debut this past November and picked up a 32-second TKO. Greg Hardy realized that he could get away with beating women. He thought, well, I can get away with beating up men. Why not? Disgusting, despicable, and I'm ashamed to be a supporter of MMA with this news. It honestly makes me sick. Disgust. I for once on this show, I'm actually speechless. For once on this show, I can honestly say that I am at a point where everything that other fighters have worked their asses off for. Some fighters have chose fighting over getting their degree. Some of these guys are some of the smartest human beings out there, and they choose to fight because they enjoy it, whereas Greg Hardy chooses to fight because it's the only thing he can do, quote-unquote, professionally. Every other sport has turned him away. Every other NFL or CFL or XFL has turned him away. So this is what he's got. Congratulations, Dana White. Man, congratulations, Dana White. You further prove that you're a dude. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Greg Hardy will be debuting on the Dana White Contender Series June 12th. And I am disgusted. Take care, everybody. Last but not least, let's go Buffalo. Draft day 4 days away. It's not like I'm counting down. Take care.